Okay, and welcome to the Get Fit with Jodell podcast. I am, as usual, Jodell, and as usual, it's nice to have Georgi Dinkov back with me. Hi, Georgi.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Back with me again, and always so generous with his time. So thank you, Georgi. I appreciate that. And Georgi, I recently did a snippet video on the benefits of being outdoors and grounding, and I've always been big on the outdoors for that reason. I believe that humans nowadays spend far too much time indoors because of modern technology and how easy it is to do so. Yet sometimes we can't get outside if the weather doesn't allow us, or if we have to work indoors, and of course it's best to sleep indoors, obviously, in this day and age. It would be nice to sleep outside, but for safety purposes, sometimes we have to sleep indoors. So I recommended supplementing the earth and the benefits of earthing when you can't get outdoors with an earthing mat. And I say all that to say this: we may need to supplement the sun too when we can't make vitamin D very much this time of year, depending on where you are. And so that's why I brought you on today to talk about is the benefits of vitamin D, why we need it, why it's so important. So basically, here's the cliff notes for all the listeners that are watching of what I wanted to get your input on today. So first, I would love to educate my listeners on why we need it, why we need vitamin D to be adequate. And then I want to educate them on the symptoms they might be experiencing if they are vitamin D deficient. And after that, I want to get your opinion on things like reptile lamps and tanning beds that make vitamin D. And then finally, we know we can supplement. There's plenty of supplements out there, but there's a right way and a wrong way. And just like we supplement the earth with earthing mats, we can supplement our vitamin D, but it has to be done properly. So let's jump in. Why is vitamin D so vital to our health?
So as early as the 1920s and maybe the 1930s, medicine basically recognized that one of the core symptoms of hypothyroidism, or in general poor systemic health, is a combination of elevation of cholesterol and a drop in vitamin D levels. And for a while they wonder why that is the case, but not many people. I don't know how many of your listeners know, but vitamin D is actually a steroid, right? So you can think of vitamin D, if vitamin D is a steroid, you can think of this combination of basically your cholesterol elevates, your cholesterol levels rise while the steroid level of the levels of the steroid known as cholecalciferol, that's the actual name of vitamin D, at least the one that we make from the sun. The levels of this steroid drop, and the same thing was observed in regards to other steroids, especially the protective ones such as pregnenolone, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone in men, dihydrotestosterone. So you can think of, but unlike the blood level tests for the other steroids, like the tests for vitamin D levels are actually pretty reliable. As far as the other steroids are concerned, you're always worried about discrepancy between the levels of these steroids in the blood versus the levels of these steroids in the tissues. That's because most of the tissues around our body are capable of producing these steroids. And basically, just because you have a low or high level in the blood of this or that steroid, that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing will be happening in the tissues. A great example would be estrogen. So our fatty tissues, and many other tissues around the body are capable of producing estrogen. And a postmenopausal woman would have low estrogen levels in the blood while simultaneously having really high levels of estrogen in the tissues, because after the estrogen is produced in the tissues, unless you have progesterone, which depends on the ovaries, all this estrogen will stay in the tissues. So the doctors will look at your test and say, oh my God, you're estrogen deficient. No, not really. You're actually estrogen dominant, but the tests don't show that. But vitamin D is kind of unique in that respect, because blood levels of vitamin D very well correspond to actual synthesis of vitamin D, which happens mostly in the skin, right? So if you have elevated cholesterol levels and low levels of vitamin D, basically this means that something along the path from cholesterol to vitamin D is not working well. And vitamin D is actually a metabolite of cholesterol. So cholesterol is known as the raw material for steroids, and vitamin D, being a type of steroid, is also synthesized from cholesterol. So very early on, the doctors recognized that whenever a person's metabolic rate declines, you see elevation of cholesterol and a lowering of vitamin D. So first important reason is that it is a very good surrogate, it is a very good test for how well your metabolism is working. Unlike some of the other tests that they're also reliable, but many people don't basically don't have the time to do them, like taking temperature several times a day, right? Measuring your heart rate, other more reliable tests such as the relaxation of the Achilles tendon, which used to be a standard test, but it has to be done in a doctor's office in order to be performed properly. But these two tests, cholesterol and vitamin D, are really good indication of your overall metabolic rate. Now, so aside from diagnosing hypothyroidism, why is it good to have, good levels of vitamin D in range, right? So we right now have an epidemic of vitamin D deficiency, which is vitamin D levels below the lower end of normal, but still slightly above what they call vitamin D insufficiency, which I think is the level is 10, right? So if you have less than 10, then typically something else is going on. Basically, usually your diet is not sufficient, doesn't provide enough cholesterol. But if your diet is the normal diet that everybody eats, and you're consuming enough cholesterol, your vitamin D levels are still low. This is what we're seeing in the majority of the population at this point. This means that something in your metabolic health is not working the way it's supposed to be. That's why vitamin D levels are there. But many people say, okay, so what's the big deal? My vitamin D levels are low in the winter. Maybe that's because there's not enough sunlight, right? But in the summer, maybe they rise. Well, first of all, to go back to your point about exposure to sunlight and being indoors, right? So yes, this is a very good point. You are spending too much time indoors, so you should be outside, especially in the winter, to catch any amount of whatever little sun is out there. You want to be exposed to it, right? But in the summer, then tests were done, and they demonstrated that in the majority of people with vitamin D deficiency, the deficiency does not disappear during the summer months when they're getting exposed to more sunlight. And this means that something else is going on, which means the metabolic rate is low. In the absence of other things such as chronic infection, or toxicity of some sort. Heavy metal toxicities can inhibit many of the enzymes that are responsible for synthesizing vitamin D. So there's this widespread vitamin D deficiency, but the response from many patients and doctors is, okay, so what? It's low vitamin D levels. So many people have it. We're not seeing the sky is not falling. What's the big deal? Well, the sky is falling. If you look at the rates of various diseases, chronic dangerous conditions such as cancer, cardiovascular disease, various dementias such as Alzheimer's, infertility, polycystic ovarian syndrome, gynecological cancers, breast cancer, all of these rising rates of all these types of diseases coincide almost perfectly, inversely though, with the average levels of vitamin D throughout the years. And we've been noticing over the last 60 to 70 years that the average vitamin D levels are dropping, and then at the same time the rates of these diseases are rising. Now, of course, correlation doesn't mean causality, right? But multiple studies have been done, interventional studies have been done that administer vitamin D and have found strong protective effects against virtually every single one of these chronic diseases. And even aside from these conditions that are considered non-infectious, right, they're chronic, long-term degenerative conditions, recent studies found that vitamin D is actually a very potent anti-pathogen agent. I just posted a study on my blog which demonstrated that if you can use a vitamin D solution as an actual antibiotic to completely sterilize a wound that is infected with a pretty virulent strain of bacteria, which typically takes an potent antibiotic ointment to actually kill the bacteria and let the woman heal, the wound heal. Yet the vitamin D solution was just as effective, and the way it helped the healing was actually by stimulating the endogenous ability of the organism to fight this bacteria, which is really the way things work in nature, right? If a fox or a wolf gets hurt, they don't run to the local forest doctor and say, "Oh, give me the antibiotic ointment." They rely on some kind of an endogenous mechanism to survive that wound, that cut, which very often in nature gets infected. And multiple studies have demonstrated that vitamin D is perhaps it's one of the most crucial, if not the most crucial factor in maintaining this endogenous level of, I don't want to call it immunity, but resistance to infection. So it does other things. Because it is a steroid, it's been found that vitamin D actually can block the estrogen receptors and sort of modulate the effect that estrogen has on tissues. So you can think of it as a less toxic version of the so-called selective estrogen receptor modulators, SERMs, such as clomiphene, tamoxifen, raloxifene. All of these are drugs given to women for breast cancer, for preventing breast cancer or treating it, for helping with their brittle bones, for helping with memory, sexual health, etc., etc. But these are actually synthetic estrogens. So they, even you're given this pill, even though you're given this pill for specific reasons such as protecting your breast, the doctor is not telling you that at the same time this drug selectively acts as an actual estrogen and a much more potent version of it in other tissues. So you're kind of paying like, you know, the trade-off is really terrible. You get protected from breast cancer, but you're paying the price for this is ovarian cancer. You know, not many women will consider this a acceptable alternative if the doctor was, you know, upfront and honest about what the risks of these SERMs are. Well, as it turns out, vitamin D is such a SERM, and it doesn't really have any of these toxic side effects that many of the synthetic SERMs do. In addition, vitamin D is known to be able to activate the progesterone receptor. So it very much acts like as a substitute for progesterone. And this probably explains why it's capable of blocking estrogen, because progesterone is the endogenous anti-estrogen factor. So if you're not producing sufficient progesterone, which happens for women after menopause, well, vitamin D is your sort of like, you know, it's the last line of defense against estrogen. And now with all of these deficiencies that we're seeing in the population, it makes perfect sense that the rates of all of these estrogen-driven cancers will be rising, because after menopause, if your vitamin D levels are also low, there is nothing protecting you from that estrogen. Furthermore, vitamin D has been shown, since it's a steroid, to potentiate the activity of thyroid hormone, to potentiate the activity of androgens, while at the same time mitigating the risk of their side effects. And in fact, there's a company, I think it's an American company, but the researcher is originally from the Netherlands, and they have patented a special concoction of a androgenic anabolic steroid used by bodybuilders and athletes in combination with vitamin D. You see, like, medicine has always recognized that giving older people, fragile people, frail people steroids is very beneficial. It restores their muscle mass, restores their bone health, but it's got a lot of side effects, such as, you know, gynecomastia in men. It can basically cause liver enlargement or heart enlargement in both sexes. It can cause skin issues such as acne, right? It turns out that if you add just a little bit of vitamin D to that steroid, most of the side effects disappear, while all of the benefits are not only stay but also amplified by vitamin D. So you can think of vitamin D as this steroid modulator that protects from the excess and from the bad, from all of the bad effects of the steroids that we know are harmful, such as cortisol and estrogen and prolactin as well, while at the same time amplifying the effects of the good steroids, and in some cases being able to even completely fill in for them, such as progesterone. Just as I mentioned a few minutes earlier, so also the role of vitamin D in the immune system and bone health is also a very big deal. So pretty much everybody knows that, you know, if you go to a doctor and you have some kind of issues with your bones, if you have osteopenia or even osteoporosis, the advice will usually be take vitamin D and calcium, right? But the doctor doesn't explain how exactly that whole process works. Well, vitamin D is known for increasing the absorption of calcium from the tissues, and that's what most doctors will tell you. They'll be like, okay, so vitamin D will increase the absorption, and also if you're taking calcium as a supplement, these two in combination should be able to give you more calcium in the blood, and we're hoping that, you know, this will repair your bones. But there's a crucial step missing here, and that crucial step is calcium just by itself. If it floats around in the bloodstream for too long, it tends to accumulate in soft tissues. So you're getting soft tissue calcification, which is really bad. I mean, pretty much any kind of fibrosis in tissues starts with calcification as a first step. Well, vitamin D also happens to be the cofactor, together with vitamin K, the cofactor for producing of a protein called osteocalcin. That protein is produced in the bones, and vitamin K also activates it. So that protein takes all the calcium that you ate from your diet, and that calcium got into the bloodstream, and then this protein binds that calcium and shuttles it off to the bones, And if this protein isn't there, this osteocalcium levels are low or missing, or somehow this binding of calcium is prevented, then all this calcium is actually pretty harmful, right? You tend to get this soft tissue calcification. So as a recap, vitamin D is basically crucial for your immune system, crucial for protecting you from the carcinogenic and catabolic hormones such as estrogen, cortisol, aldosterone, prolactin. It's crucial for the amplification of the good steroids, and also potentially even filling for some of them. And it's also really vital for your brain. And overall, just as a biomarker, vitamin D is one of the factors that was shown to be most strongly negatively correlated with all-cause mortality. In other words, the higher your vitamin D levels were tested over a certain period of time, the lower your risk of dying from any cause. And we're not talking just about disease. Interestingly, people with higher vitamin D levels were less prone to get into accidents. In other words, they were safer drivers. They were less prone to risky behavior, such as drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and in general, things that can lead to violent death not related to a disease. So it just does seem that vitamin D has this systemic protective effect, which is very reminiscent of the effects of other similar steroids, such as thyroid hormone and progesterone. So it's really a testament to how poor the average health has become, considering the fact that average vitamin D levels are dropping throughout the world. So you can't just really blame it on the Western lifestyle. Now, hundreds of millions of people in India have a vitamin D deficiency, even though their lifestyle hasn't really changed. They're still pretty much eating traditionally as they used to before. People in other parts of like Eastern Asia, people in Russia, people in even countries further south that are supposed to be getting a decent amount of sun exposure, which means that something else is behind. So the sun exposure factor is known, right? So northern countries tend to have lower levels of vitamin D on average, but there's also something else going on that demonstrates that even in countries that get enough sun exposure, something in our environment is preventing us from synthesizing this extremely protective nutrient.
There's something that you said that I want to go back to that's kind of off topic, but the estrogen part that you mentioned about we get our blood test done, especially women after menopause get their blood work done, and it shows estrogen is low, like you said. But one thing they're not taking into factor, and I wanted to make sure I was understanding you, is that there's excess estrogens in the tissue, and that can't be measured on a blood test, correct? Because
yes, so
I feel like there's a lot of women who have excess estrogen, but their doctor will say no because the blood work's not showing it.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So first of all, the doctors usually test only, there are several types of estrogen, actually there are multiple types of estrogens. There are just various metabolites of the hormone, which is called estrogen, and that usually corresponds to a specific steroid core molecule with a bunch of other different so-called functional groups attached to it. So the most commonly tested, in fact, usually the only type of estrogen doctors test is called estradiol. Right. And only in pregnant women they test another one called estriol. Right. So estradiol is usually abbreviated as E2, and estriol is usually abbreviated as E3. But there is another estrogen called estrone, and specifically its sulfated version called estrone sulfate. So it has been shown that if your doctor actually tests, so the estriol levels, the E3, are typically only useful to test for the determination of pregnancy. These levels rise in pregnant women, right? If they're high in a woman that is not pregnant, then this is a pretty good indication of usually of a tumor somewhere, right? This is another indication of just how healthy estrogen is for you, is that its elevations, outside of pregnancy of estriol are actually a pretty bad sign. But anyways, back to the main one, estradiol. It is produced mostly by the ovaries, and progesterone is also produced mostly by the ovaries. So it's quite natural that if you go to a doctor and you're postmenopausal, the doctor will test estradiol and progesterone. These will come back low, and the doctor will say, well, actually, even the current definition is incorrect. The doctor should be telling you you're both estrogen and progesterone deficient. Yet somehow the mainstream label that got attached to menopause is that it is a condition of estrogen deficiency. Right. Nobody really talks much about the progesterone. Yeah. But however, doctors typically do not test the third type of estrogen, the main one, which is estrone, and specifically estrone sulfate. And recently I posted a few studies on my blog that demonstrate that if you test estrogen sulfate, those levels are actually it either, I mean, basically, not only they're normal, quote unquote, they're in range they will be similar to the levels of a woman in her 20s or 30s, but actually in some cases the levels of estrogen sulfate are above range. And endocrinologists will probably respond with, okay, so what? It's estrogen sulfate. We only care about estradiol and potentially estriol, right? But for a postmenopausal woman, pregnancy is usually not a concern. So we only care about estradiol, Georgie. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that estrogen sulfate is a very long-term reservoir of estrogen. And as needed, estrogen sulfate can get converted inside tissues to estradiol. And what we care in terms of estrogenicity is what's the level of estrogen in your tissues. That's where the estrogen acts, right? The blood is just a carrier. The blood just gives you an indication of, are you carrying enough estrogen from the source, which is the ovaries? And in this case, the answer is no. That doesn't mean you don't produce other estrogens. And especially in the case of this estrogen sulfate, if this estrogen can get easily converted to estradiol, and if the estrogen sulfate levels are normal or even above range, but the progesterone levels are still low, then for all intents and purposes, the menopause should be reclassified as a condition of estrogen normalcy progesterone deficiency or estrogen excess progesterone deficiency. At the very best, you're having a normal estrogen and a low progesterone. But the absolute levels actually are kind of misleading. What doctors really care about, rightfully so, is the ratio. So if you have, the ratio of estrogen to progesterone. So if indeed your estrogen, if the tissue levels of estrogen, because of the elevated levels of estrogen sulfate, if the tissue levels of estrogen are actually normal or high, while your progesterone levels are below the detectable range, right, the normal one, then you are in a state of estrogen excess. It's just, that's, a normal value divided by a very low one still gives you a very large one. And if you use the formula they calculate for calculating the estrogen to progesterone ratio for premenopausal women, if you use the same formula for postmenopausal women, but use the estrogen sulfate and progesterone, you will get a number that, if this number was produced for a woman in her 20s or 30s, her doctor will freak out. Her doctor will probably say, you have too much estrogen. You're too estrogenic. We need to do something to balance that. And the doctor's response usually is either prescribing aromatase inhibitors or like a synthetic progestin, because it's known to block the effects of estrogen. Yet none of this is done for postmenopausal women. So if women really want to know their true state of estrogen, the two best biomarkers, in other words, the two best tests that can be done is estrogen sulfate and prolactin. Now, why prolactin? Well, prolactin is produced by the pituitary primarily under the influence of either cortisol or estrogen. So if you're going to the doctor and you're testing your prolactin, and your prolactin is, let's say, in the upper 25% of normal or even above normal, then there are only two reasons for this, actually three reasons for the prolactin. One, there is a benign tumor called prolactinoma in the pituitary gland, but it tends to be rare. And usually, if there is such a tumor, the levels of prolactin are really, really high. So, but if you're getting prolactin levels that are in the upper 25% number or slightly above, then the only two other reasons that are known to result in this is either elevated stress, like basically high cortisol, or high estrogen. So you can also, if you test also for cortisol and that comes back low or normal, right, then the only other option remains is estrogen. So prolactin together with estrogen sulfate is a pretty good surrogate, pretty good indication, just like cholesterol and vitamin D. They're very good surrogates, very good indication of how your overall metabolism and thyroid function are working. The same thing, estrogen sulfate and prolactin are a great indicator of your whole body reserves of estrogen and or whole body estrogenic tone, right? So if these are out of whack, then no matter what the doctor says, I mean, actually, if you do these tests and show them to the doctor and you do come back abnormal, you will see that your doctor will shut up and probably start scratching his or her head and trying to come up with explanations of, why these things are not as dangerous as they seem, but at the very least, you'll get an admission that things are not as peachy as the doctor thinks they are. And most menopausal women know this intuitively, right? I mean, you don't need a doctor to tell you that once menopause hits, you're not feeling right. There's something, just something doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And then unfortunately, most of these poor women get assigned to a psychiatrist. You know, if the doctor does some blood work, typically as estradiol and progesterone, these come back normal, expected for, you know, for in the ranges expected for a menopausal woman, and the doctor thinks, okay, that's just how nature works. You're in this stage, so if you continue to feel malaise or, you know, some kind of, you know, agitation or nervousness, it has to be psychological. So let me put you on an antidepressant and let me send you to a psychiatrist and see what comes out of it. And as we know, this also does not resolve the issue. Otherwise, we wouldn't have all these women searching for answers constantly. I mean, there must be an underlying reason, and the underlying reason is they're not feeling well.
Yeah, and I think it's just a really important thing for people to ruminate on, is because they will get, I see women all the time coming to me with their blood work for nutrition, and they'll show me, no, my estrogen's low, so my doctor put me on a compounded estrogen, but I don't feel any better, and I'm putting on weight, and I already had weight to begin with. And right. So I really appreciate that you shared with them what tests they could run, because even if your doctor won't do it, a lot of these online things like healthlabs.com, you can order specific tests and biomarkers just to know for sure, even if your doctor won't run it. So I know we're a little off topic, but I thought it was important to mention.
Yes. These are standard tests, and the doctor will do them at least once a year, because the insurance typically for most people covers at least once a year. You can actually ask for some tests because you feel they're relevant, right? And the doctors usually won't fight it because the insurance will cover it at least once a year. Okay. Now, after that, the doctor still won't fight it if you're willing to pay out of pocket. And most of these tests are not that expensive. The prolactin is typically out of pocket is $50, right? And the estrogen sulfate is probably $75. Now, it's not pocket change, but if you're really that concerned about your health, and if you ask your doctor, these are standard tests. The doctor is able to order them, because I've ordered them myself, and the doctor did fight it initially, but the reason turned out to be the doctor didn't want to fight with the insurance company and said, look, the insurance company won't cover it. And as soon as I said I'll pay out of pocket, he just wrote him, he wrote me a lab order. I walked over to LabCorp and they did the test. So so they are standard tests. They're not exotic. They're not some kind of unique test that you have to go to a special lab. These are mainstream tests, and in fact, they used to be done as part of the regular lab work for pre-post-menopausal women up until the 1960s, which is when the whole corrupt theory about estrogen being the specific female hormone, the fountain of youth, that we should be promoting it. We should be giving women these synthetic estrogens. That's when, after this theory took over and and took off, then basically the result was all of these older tests, which were used to show that there is an estrogen excess, they kind of got forgotten, or at the very least they stopped getting recommended. Pharma companies and basically the industry, the pharmaceutical industry that was producing synthetic estrogens lobbied heavily that these tests fall out of the official FDA recommendations, the FDA guidelines for what should be tested in menopausal women. But they're there. They're still approved tests, and if you ask for them, the doctor can't really say no as long as you're willing to pay for them.
Yeah, you're right. They are mainstream. It's just, I think that people have to be specific, because I've had women that go, well, I asked my doctor about estrogen. Here you go. Here's the results. And it's just like you said, estradiol. So they have to say that the one you said, the estrogen sulfate, is that how you say it? Yeah, and the prolactin, and be specific about that, because that's where we're falling behind, is the doctors will just run the standard estrogen test that they run. So yeah, that's the unfortunate part. So going back to vitamin D, since we kind of derailed, but I thought it was an important topic to discuss, because so many people think they have low estrogen, but they actually are storing it in their tissues. So it's good to find out. What are some symptoms that people will start to really see that their vitamin D has tanked? What would those look like?
First of all, bone pain, joint pain is a great sign. And another one which many people don't associate with vitamin D is actually muscle quality. Muscle atrophy is one of the first symptoms of vitamin D deficiency, because just as I said, there are several steroids inside the body that protect from the catabolic effects of cortisol. And cortisol with age doesn't fall. It doesn't rise, but it doesn't fall either. So to go back to that ratio of estrogen to progesterone, so your cortisol levels basically after you hit puberty, you produce cortisol in a diurnal pattern, but your ability to produce cortisol in a 24-hour period is more or less constant for the rest of your life, unless you get some kind of a disease like adrenal failure or or your adrenals get taken out surgically for some reason, right? So if that's not the case, then for the rest of your life, you're capable of producing pretty much the same amount of cortisol as you were capable in your early teens. What happens, but the other thing that happens with age is that basically the levels of the protective steroids, such as progesterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, testosterone, they tank. And those are the steroids that protect your muscles from the catabolic effects of cortisol. So consequently, the ratio of cortisol to any of these, you can call them anti-catabolic or even anabolic hormones, right? And cortisol is the catabolic one for muscle. So the ratio of the catabolic hormone to the anti-catabolic or the anabolic ones rises with age, right? Because the levels of the protective hormones drop. So at some point, usually around the age of 50, or in some people earlier, really depends on your health. At some point, the levels of these protective anti-catabolic hormones drop to the level where cortisol really takes over. You basically start becoming mostly catabolic. And you can see this in older people, both men and women. You start to get this really sagging skin everywhere, and you start to accumulate a lot of fat, especially in the midsection. So all of this is a sign of excess cortisol, right? But in people with normal vitamin D levels, this process is greatly retarded / inhibited, and in some people it's even missing. And then they found out through studies, mostly on animals, that if you supplement additional vitamin D, many of these catabolic changes that occur with age actually disappear. But if you're starting to get, in other words, if you're starting to get sagging skin and weak muscles and soft muscles, and in general feeling frail, like balance problems, poor appetite, poor digestion, starting to get a lot infections a lot more frequently, especially viral ones. All of these are signs that your immune function is really not working very well. And one of the primary factors for a proper regulation of the immune function is vitamin D. And again, the estrogen and cortisol are again involved. They're actually catabolic hormones for the immune system as well. Both of these atrophy the thymus gland, which is located right behind your sternum bone. And then it's the thymus that is kind of like the conductor of your entire immune system. So if your thymus is atrophied, you will have problems with opportunistic infections pretty much, any season of the year. It doesn't matter if it's spring or summer when you're supposed to be, more resilient. But if vitamin D levels are normal, if you supplement with additional vitamin D, many, if not most of these changes disappear simply because vitamin D opposes the catabolic pro-infectious, pro-aging effects of these hormones. And also it protects also from the effects of endocrine disruptors. So if you're dealing with a lot of plastic, if you're dealing with if you're cooking with if your utensils, the kitchen utensils have a lot of Teflon in them, all of these produce endocrine disruptors that are estrogenic, glucocorticoid, and anti-thyroid. And vitamin D happens to protect against most of these effects. So again, one of the first symptoms in a vitamin D deficiency, aside from bone pain and joint pain, is muscle atrophy, thinnings and sagging skin, so cognitive dysfunction is another one. Vitamin D has huge effects in the brain. Let's see, poor sleep is also a very good indication. And liver function. So there was a study that came out recently which showed that there's almost perfect inverse correlation between the levels of vitamin D and the levels of liver enzymes. So many people will go to their doctor and they'll get a liver panel test, which includes usually 3 enzymes, ALT, AST, ASP, right? And also albumin and globulin. That's like just part of the basic liver panel. And the doctor will say, been drinking lately, haven't we? And sometimes the response is, no, I'm a teetotaler, I don't drink at all. Well, your liver enzymes say otherwise, so you'll get like this stern talking to and kind of get sent off with a warning that you need to cut down whatever it is that you're consuming because your liver is under strain. Yet the doctor probably didn't think to test your vitamin D levels, and if he or she did, chances are that absent alcohol abuse or doing anything else that actually does strain the liver, such as taking Tylenol on a regular basis. So if these things are not an issue, then usually the cause is actually vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D is highly protective for the liver. And the problem with the liver is that if your liver is overburdened, then you immediately start getting into both cortisol and estrogen excess because it is the liver that glucuronidates these steroids and makes them possible for excretion by the kidneys. Speaking of kidneys, kidney disease. So if you go to the doctor and you get your kidney function tested, if your creatinine is higher than where it needs to be, one of the first things the doctor will do is test you for diabetes, because diabetes and kidney disease, they kind of go hand in hand. And if your blood sugar levels are normal, well, we'll get to that. Then the doctor will basically say, oh, it's idiopathic. We don't know what's causing it, right? But again, the doctor will probably not think to test your vitamin D levels. Chances are, if you have an issue with your kidneys and it's not related to diabetes or any kind of heavy metal toxicity, which is notorious for damaging the kidneys, chances are it's low vitamin D levels that's involved. Speaking of diabetes and glucose, one of the first signs of impending diabetes type 2, before even weight starts to accumulate, is that your fasting blood sugar, normally it should be in the 70s to the 85 range. Mm-hmm. Your fasting blood sugar will start climbing into the 90s, mm-hmm. and potentially even a little bit over 100, which is called a pre-diabetes condition. Now, if you're overweight, the doctor will say, oh, it's probably because you're overweight, right? But again, the doctor will usually not think to test your vitamin D levels. And if your weight is not excessive, then usually the only other explanation would be vitamin D, right? Why? Because elevated blood glucose typically is driven by elevated free fatty acids in the blood and elevated cortisol. And as we already said, vitamin D opposes cortisol. Vitamin promotes progesterone. Vitamin promotes the oxidation of glucose and inhibits the oxidation of fat. Vitamin D also inhibits the release of fat from the fatty tissue, so it will also lower these levels of elevated fatty acids that are seen in obesity and diabetes. So again, most doctors, when they test for specific things, they're thinking of some kind of a named disease, right? And if they find it, then even though the vitamin D may still be involved, then the doctor will even refuse to test vitamin D afterwards because they'll say it's irrelevant, right? But if there is no known cause for the symptoms that you're experiencing, the doctor will simply say it's idiopathic, and then they'll say we don't know what's causing it. But again, in most cases, if not all of them, the low levels of vitamin D that are seen now in most people are probably causatively involved. It's because the vitamin D is not just a sign of metabolic dysfunction, at some point it becomes a cause of it as well.
Yeah, and I have a theory on people that live in Hawaii, because I was there recently. I have a couple girlfriends that have lived there for 20 years. They don't have hardly any health issues. They're out in the sun all day. They're out in the ocean. I'm sure their vitamin D tanks are full. And one of them had said that no one in Hawaii really gets the cold and the flu. There's really not a cold and flu season in that area. And I found that so interesting and wondered if it really had a lot to do with vitamin D. And also, like, you don't see now, some of the native Hawaiians are a little bigger because that's their culture, that's their build, I guess, for their body. The Samoan body is a little bit bigger. But the people that have migrated there, that live on island, you don't see obese people there. And I wonder how much of vitamin D, and probably earthing and grounding, because they're outside on the earth a lot too, has to do with keeping their weight in check. And like you said, if it is a counter to cortisol, it's keeping that stress response down, which will also mitigate their weight. So as far as like vitamin D and weight loss and also health, immune system, how about that? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's a single study that has come out that has shown that vitamin D is not related to weight. In other words, every single one found a correlation, and all of the ones that I've seen found an inverse correlation, right? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, for some reason, well, I think we kind of suspect the reason there really isn't commercial interest in vitamin D, but there aren't any trials, unfortunately, so far that have done interventions. In other words, let's give these people vitamin D and see if they actually lose weight. Mm-hmm. There are some trials like that, but they're usually with people with already established diabetes. And these people are also put on a specific diet. They're trying to restrict their calories, right? So at the end of the day, if these people become healthier, it's ascribed to them eating less, right? Starving and, eating these specific low-calorie foods, and not so much the vitamin D supplementation. But if you look at the animal trials, where researchers can pretty much do whatever they want, it is indisputable that vitamin D is the primarily regulator of obesity through multiple factors. I mean, first of all, your metabolic rate mostly depends, aside from thyroid function, mostly depends on the amount of lean mass that you maintain, lean muscle mass. And if lean muscle mass depends mostly on vitamin D, then clearly, like basically, if you have high vitamin D levels, you have enough muscle, you'll be burning a lot more calories. Um, Something to keep in mind that at rest, muscles burn primarily fat. And many people think, oh, I need to exercise in order for me to burn fat. No, actually, you need to do concentric exercise that builds muscle mass and avoid things that destroy your muscle mass. And if you do that, then most of the calories actually from fat that you're eating don't get burned out while you sleep or while you're resting. Keep in mind, gorillas in the wild eat, they don't lift weights and they don't really climb trees very much. Chimps do, but not gorillas. And yet, the epitome of a extremely muscular animal in nature is the male gorilla. Actually, the females are also pretty muscular. And so they don't exercise, they don't run around, what they do is they eat proper food, they spend a lot of time in the sun, and they keep their stress levels down, because aside from humans and maybe python snakes for the little ones, gorillas don't really have a natural enemy. So it's like that kind of lifestyle demonstrates that you can live a pretty healthy life and maintain proper physique without subjecting yourself to a lot of the stresses that many people nowadays think are required in order for you to be healthy. No, it's actually to the contrary. You may be looking okay while you're overexerting yourself, but the moment you stop, then you revert to an even worse level than where you started. So the goal is keep the endogenous balance where it's supposed to be, and don't deviate from it too much by overexerting yourself. And one of the simple and more systemically beneficial things a person can do is keep their vitamin levels in their normal range. Sun exposure, grounding, maybe vitamin D supplementation, eating liver, because if you eat liver, most of the liver of an animal is stored in its most of the vitamin D of an animal is stored in the liver. So things like that. I mean, spending more time in nature where the air is ionized, is negatively charged, so basically tends to oxidize serotonin and reduce your overall levels of serotonin in the body, which serotonin is one of the primary breaks from metabolism, regardless of your body weight, regardless of your body composition. So keeping serotonin levels down is probably one of the most benign and effective ways in terms of losing weight. And now pharma companies are running clinical trials with drugs that inhibit the synthesis of serotonin as a way of curing. Actually, they are using the word cure. They're hoping these drugs would cure diabetes type 2 and what they call the metabolic syndrome, which at this point more than 38% of Americans have, which basically comes down to being overweight and having a fasting blood sugar between 100 and 125. So they're not yet diabetic, but they're getting pretty close to. And multiple clinical trials already are kind of showing that simply inhibiting serotonin is a great way of losing that weight. And what does that have to do with vitamin D? Well, the enzyme that synthesizes serotonin from the amino acid tryptophan, it has been shown that vitamin D is one of the most potent endogenous blockers of that enzyme. So that's yet another mechanism through which vitamin D maintains healthy weight, keeps the fat away, and helps you build muscle.
Yeah, my daughter, ever since she was a baby, I have always had a stick of butter that is her stick. She can chew on it and gnaw on it. When she didn't have teeth, she'd just suck on a stick of butter. And the people look at me like I'm crazy, but I still, to this day, she's 5 now, and I let her gnaw on butter anytime because it is a vitamin D source. It's a vitamin K source. It's a vitamin A. So you're getting all those fat soluble vitamins to help when in these times of the month or the year when we can't get that good vitamin D from the sun. What are some other foods or a diet that you really like as far as the vitamin D amping it up naturally?
So basically eating any food that would raise endogenous cholesterol levels, right? And also making sure that cholesterol it can be converted basically further downstream into the protective steroids. So saturated fats are a great way of raising cholesterol. Eating carbohydrates that are easily digestible. So not things like beans and soy that can reach the colon and generate a lot of endotoxin. That's not good because endotoxin not only increases systemic inflammation, but it has been shown to directly inhibit the enzyme that converts cholesterol to the precursor of vitamin D in the skin. So basically keeping digestion going well and eating foods that raise cholesterol, and then taking some supplements that increase the conversion of cholesterol into downstream steroids including vitamin D, such as, aspirin, caffeine, gelatin. Taking thyroid does it as well, right? But if you want to stay away from the steroids, the dietary measures are caffeine, aspirin, eating extra salt helps as well because it lowers serotonin and increases your overall metabolic rate. Magnesium helps too. And let's see, what else? Maybe some of the B vitamins such as B1, B2, and B3 because they help the liver excrete the extra estrogen and cortisol, which allows for more vitamin D to be synthesized because estrogen and cortisol, not only are they antagonistic with the vitamin D, they also block its synthesis. So the less of these steroids, the bad, I don't want to call it the bad ones, but like the less of these, non-healthy steroids you have in excess, such as cortisol, estrogen, and prolactin, the more vitamin D will be able to produce as well. And in general, keeping stress low. Anytime your cortisol rises, almost everything else that the body doesn't consider absolutely vital for survival gets shut down, or at the very least, greatly inhibited. So, things like reproductive function, cognitive function, creativity, the ability to experience joy from life, all of these things the body immediately, this is a signal to the body, stress, cortisol, signal to the body that I don't need to worry about these things right now because there are other things to worry about, like I need to worry about survival. Well, it seems that we're kind of stuck in a chronic mode of survival. At least most people in the Western psychotic societies, except for your friends in Hawaii, which I'm gathering that's why they have no interest in joining the people on the continent, on the mainland, because they have already set a perfect life for themselves there.
Yeah, I just noticed so much about their health. One woman being over 56 years old, she still has a full cycle with her menstrual cycle and nothing has changed. And she, mainland women, we don't see a lot of that. So, she's got this very healthy youthfulness about her, and she's been on the island for 20 years and was from the mainland, but just that I just observed a lot when I was there. Talk to me about tanning beds and reptile lamps. A lot of people in the winter months use these things to kind of see if they can amp up vitamin D. What do you think about that?
So the vitamin D, yes, there is truth to that because the vitamin D in the skin is produced under the influence of ultraviolet light type B. Unfortunately, most of the tanning beds only provide the UV spectrum of the light, and that by itself is very, very carcinogenic. Now, it doesn't produce the most dangerous types of skin cancer, which is melanoma. Actually, that type of skin cancer is now known to be related to excess estrogen, which is yet another way through which vitamin D helps, right? Because it's blocking that effect. Most of the melanomas show up on spots that haven't really been exposed much to sunlight. So even though doctors keep scaring everybody saying like, oh, put on your sunscreen because you're going to get melanoma, actually the ultraviolet light in sunlight mostly causes the two more benign cancers, the basal cell carcinoma and the squamous cell carcinoma. And those are almost universally non-lethal. They're not pleasant, but they look mostly like a blemish on the skin, potentially like a small ulcer, a small sore. And then they can be easily, typically, even mainstream medicine can easily cure them by just simply excising that spot. But you can, help that by rubbing like a combination of vitamin D and A and even E. And that alone has been shown in animal trials to help heal the cancer. So excess exposure to ultraviolet light may cause the skin cancer, but mostly the more benign ones. The problem isn't so much on the surface, but because ultraviolet light is one of the greatest metabolic inhibitors. So if you're being chronically exposed to ultraviolet light, yes, you will synthesize vitamin D, but also there is a saturation point beyond which the body will not synthesize more, simply because it wants to avoid the issue of hypercalcemia. As we said, vitamin D increases the absorption of calcium from the blood. The body is very well aware of that. And then it will synthesize a certain amount of vitamin D, maybe between 30,000 to 40,000 units daily. And then after that, it will still continue to synthesize it, but you'll be at a greatly reduced rate. So tanning beds, if you want to really get the benefit for vitamin D, you need no more than 5 minutes. But we know people that are baking in those things for hours, and it's mostly done because of the tanning effect, right? Well, the tanning effect, which tends to look, many people like it because the skin gets darker. It's actually a sign of skin damage. It becomes especially bad if your subcutaneous tissue contains a lot of polyunsaturated fats, because the combination of the ultraviolet light and these polyunsaturated fats creates a lot of toxic byproducts, lipid peroxidation byproducts, and also lipofuscin, which is responsible for the so-called aging spots. It's not a coincidence that you don't see many women over 50 in tanning salons, because by that age they've already recognized that getting too much exposure to ultraviolet light doesn't make your skin look good. It made it look when people were younger, because there were many other protective factors. There was less accumulated PUFA, right? But with age, as PUFA stores tend to increase, getting this massive exposure to ultraviolet light is really not beneficial. And like I said, probably the biggest detriment of the ultraviolet light exposure, when we're talking about the hours or half an hour, several hours, is the fact that it's a metabolic inhibitor. So you're getting your basal metabolic rate greatly decreased, even though you are synthesizing a decent amount of vitamin D. So the net effect probably is a zero. It's a net zero. And if you consider the possibility of the skin cancers, I mean, most people, if they're given, it actually told the true risks of the tanning beds. In other words, like the metabolic inhibition, the potential carcinogenity, the lipofuscin, and the overall accelerated skin aging. And then they're told, well, in return, you synthesize some vitamin D. They'll probably say, no, thank you. I'm going to stick with sunlight. I mean, and the reason sunlight is better is not just because, it's natural, right? But many people don't know how to explain why that, in this case, the natural is better. It's because sunlight is also very heavy in the spectrum of red light. So really, it's the red light that stimulates the metabolism, and a little bit of ultraviolet light in sunlight that gives us the vitamin D. So nature intended for us to be absorbed, to be soaking in sunlight, not in the tanning beds. Now, I think the reptile lamps are trying to mimic, to an extent, that mixture of ultraviolet and red light, and kind of give us the artificial sun exposure when we're indoors. I know people who use them and they like them a lot, but I personally prefer, when I'm indoors, I bake almost entirely under red lights. I can turn them on if you want. There's one you see behind me up there, and there's another bulb. Let me see, just like this, point right there to my left. And then each one of these bulbs is 100 watts. And when I'm in the winter, when I'm inside, in-house, and if I'm standing here for several hours, I turn one or both of them on, and that gives me the metabolic boost. But I also make sure that I spend at least a few hours every day outside, because there's no substitute for being outside. It's not just the light; it's just being outside in nature, around other people, around other material things, like around life in general. That has a very intangible but very crucial beneficial effect on health. No amount of red light will save you if you're stuck in a cage, if you're in jail, and then you basically are not allowed to do the things that you feel like you want to do.
Yeah, the human body is super adaptable because we've adapted to these indoor technology lifestyles. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something, because we wonder why we're so sick and why we have so many issues that we're trying to resolve. And something so simple as going out into the sun and putting your bare feet on the earth, even if it's cold out, bundle up the rest of your body and expose what you can and be outside, because that's what humans were made for, not this modernized technology. And so I love that you make sure and make that a part of your day. I do as well. And I also have one of those reptile lamps, and I put my sauna space red light next to it. So I try to get like both the UVB and the red light on me as well. And so I don't know if I'm doing myself a service, but it feels really good, because it feels like I'm getting a little vitamin D and then also some red light. So.
Yeah, you probably are. I just wouldn't overdo it. If the light has any component that is ultraviolet, right, I would limit the exposure to maybe half an hour tops. And after that, if you have a red light, you can continue using only the red portion, and you should be fine, because the vitamin D, because it's a fat-soluble component, you don't need to constantly produce it. If you got your dosage for the day, that should keep you going for at least a day, if not more. So you can probably use those reptile lights a few times a week and still be perfectly fine in terms of vitamin D production, while keeping the risks of the UV light pretty low.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it for people like in the rainy areas like Seattle and stuff, where they don't get a lot of sun for many days on end. At least the little sun lamp, the reptile lamp, can really make you feel like you're getting that burst of sunshine when you have no sun. So going into our next subject here, so we've talked about, natural ways that we can improve it and just the importance of being outside. But what about our supplementation? So there's a right way and a wrong way. There's lots of products out there for vitamin D supplementation. What do you say and what do you recommend?
So typically the vitamin D products that are on the market, at least in the United States, the one that I've seen, fall into two categories. The prescription products, the prescription strength ones, usually contain vitamin D2, which also known as ergocalciferol, right? And then if you go to the doctor and say, like, the doctor says you have a low vitamin D levels, he or she will usually write you a prescription for this vitamin D2 product. Comes in tablets, and typically the dosage is 50,000 units once a week. Now, I don't know why they decided on this protocol. The studies that I've seen demonstrate that since there is a risk of hypercalcemia from vitamin D, usually doses above 10,000 units daily are not recommended. It has already been calculated that if you want to really limit your risk of hypercalcemia to, let's say, 1 in a million, you shouldn't be taking more than 5,000 units of vitamin D daily. The doctor will happily prescribe you 50,000 units daily. Yes, they're only taken once a week, but you are taking them in a single day. So, and all it takes is, taking that hefty dosage initially to get you to that level, to increase the risk of calcification of the soft tissues. So vitamin D2 is a fine source of vitamin D, but because it is a prescription product, I think most online vendors don't carry it. Or if they do, they may ask you for a prescription. But it's perfectly fine. In fact, vitamin D3, which is the mainstream supplemental vitamin D that is available in most of these stores without prescription, in the body gets converted to vitamin D2 as part of the process, and the ultimate conversion ends with something called calcitriol, which is considered the activated vitamin D. That's what doctors care about. But multiple studies have shown that all forms of vitamin D, even the so-called precursors such as vitamin D2 and D3, all of them have activity, have the same activity on systemic health and opposing the catabolic hormones and promoting the immune system, etc. So you don't necessarily need to take the activated form calcitriol, which, by the way, is only available in injection and only available by prescription. So most of the supplements you can get online are going to be of the vitamin D3 form, also known as cholecalciferol. Even though the RDA for vitamin D3 for adults, I think, is 400 units daily, international units, that's a puny dosage. I don't even know if that would actually have any systemic effect, especially for somebody who is in a state of deficiency.
Yeah, for sure.
There is an organization called the Vitamin D Research Council, and what they do is they've compiled all of the research that's available on vitamin D and has been performed in both humans and animals from all over the world, and they have made so-called meta-analysis. In other words, pulling different studies and seeing on average what is the dosage that's optimal for most people, at what level it becomes dangerous, and at what level really shouldn't be crossing. And they found out that up to 8,000 units daily should be pretty safe for most people, unless you already have established hypercalcemia, which is usually due to other problems. So unless you have that already established, up to 8,000 units daily is probably pretty safe. And then in order to be even safer, they're saying for most people, they wouldn't recommend using more than 5,000 units daily. And then they're saying a typical good daily dosing regimen for the vast majority of people during the winter should be 2,000 to 3,000 units daily, usually taken in form of a gel cap, taken oral. You can also take it topically, but the amount you apply on the skin should be higher because the absorption rate from fat-based products with vitamin D liquid products is usually about 30%. So if you want to be shooting for about 3,000 units to be absorbed, you should probably apply about 10,000 units on your skin.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and I had heard, and actually what I use with a lot of my clients is about 500 IUs for every 25 pounds of body weight. That's a general good, I mean, if they're not super low, that's a good starting point of just for every 25 pounds, 500 IUs. Yeah. And that seems to keep the levels content there.
If you actually calculate it, it actually matches almost perfectly with the recommendations of the Vitamin D Council,
And so the cofactors, I mean, do they really need to have, are there certain things they need to have in order to absorb that supplemental vitamin D?
There aren't really any cofactors. It's just that keep in mind that because it's a fat-soluble vitamin, it does need some fat in order to be properly absorbed.
Mhm.
But if the vitamin D product is developed, is dissolved already in fat, especially longer chain fatty acids such as the ones found in olive oil,
Mhm.
butter, like beef tallow,
Mhm.
even coconut oil. And if you mix a little bit of vitamin E to it, then basically the vitamin D, most of it will absorb inside the lymphatic system and will bypass the liver. And then the reason you kind of want that is that whatever you take orally typically passes through the liver, and then the liver decides how much to keep, how much to excrete, and then how much to let pass into the systemic circulation. And then it just so happens that the liver likes vitamin D, so most of the dosage that you're taking will end up staying inside the liver, especially if your liver is unhealthy. So
Mhm.
there's now an epidemic of the disease, so-called fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
The medical abbreviation is NAFLD,
Mhm.
non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Even there's some cases of even of NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis.
Mhm.
There are quite a few cases of cirrhosis as well. All of the people with somehow burdened liver, whatever dosage of vitamin D they take, chances are the liver will keep most of it for itself because it is so beneficial for the liver. So they may have trouble raising their blood levels of vitamin D, and the doctor, will keep testing them and say, well, your vitamin D levels are not rising. You need to take more. No, you don't need to take more, because it's at some point after the liver has taken its share, blood levels will start to rise. But it's been shown that in some people may take up to 6 months of daily supplementation with about at least 3,000 units daily in order for you to see your levels get it back into the normal range if you're having a deficiency. Because if you're having a deficiency, chances are your liver will also be with suboptimal function. So the liver needs to become healthy again until it lets enough of the vitamin D that you've ingested to let it into the bloodstream. And if you want to circumvent that process, then the way to do that is by dissolving the vitamin D or buying a product where the vitamin D has been dissolved in these longer chain fats such as olive oil, butter, coconut oil, and has a little bit of vitamin E added to it, because vitamin E combines with this fatty mixture and helps it avoid the liver, gets into the lymphatic system, and it gets distributed evenly throughout your organism as needed.
Well, so on that note, let's talk about your favorite recommended vitamin D supplement. What would that be?
Well, I mean, as you know, we carry our own, but
Yeah.
ours is made for topical administration
Yeah.
specifically, and it is dissolved in a mixture of alcohol
Mhm.
and these longer chain saturated fatty acids.
Mhm.
So it has pretty good absorption through the skin, and anything you apply through the skin tends to avoid the liver, right?
Mhm.
So with our product, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, because even though you're avoiding the liver on the first pass, don't worry, your liver is not getting neglected. I mean, all of this vitamin D floating around in the bloodstream will eventually also pass through the liver through the second pass metabolism. So the liver will get its fair share too. But if you're experiencing issues not related to liver, such as joint pain, muscle atrophy, cognitive dysfunction, and infertility, in general, low metabolic rate, you could benefit more by raising systemic levels of vitamin D first, and then worry about the liver. And that's what the topical product allows you to do. And our estimation is that ours probably has an absorption rate of 50 to 60%, which is about twice of what you would get in a normal product, dissolved in fat. And in addition, because the fatty products, they leave your skin oily. Very often you can't really put any clothing on it. You have to wait for at least 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour, and you keep rubbing this thing into the skin in order to absorb properly. Ours, basically, because it's an ethanol-based product, it dries out within a minute, and
Mhm.
after that, the skin is smooth and non-oily.
Mhm.
So that's another benefit that we think many people appreciate, because let's face it, nobody has an hour of free time a day to just sit there and rub their vitamin D into their skin.
Yeah,
And
and I can attest to that product doing just as you say, because that's the supplement that I use in the winters. The Calcitrol is
calcium,
what your product is, and yeah, you don't have to wait for it, like you said. And I'm glad you brought up the liver part, because there are a lot of people that will go, no matter what I do, I can't get my vitamin D level up. I've taken and taken and taken, and I was under the impression that there was a gene mutation that also didn't allow certain people to synthesize vitamin D very well. But maybe it's more like you say, the liver is just so hungry for it that it's really taking it all. So I would say that your product like you said, it's going to help that systemic vitamin D and not be so taken by the liver. Is that correct?
Yes. So it will help appease the doctor, because the doctor goes by the tests that are by the blood test, right? But it will also help the liver. So for people that are really worried about their liver and also the systemic levels, I would use both, right? There is no reason why you couldn't take 1,000 units orally and then do another 2,000 topically. I mean, by factoring the absorption factor, which means apply 4,000 orally, apply 4,000 topically, so 2,000 get absorbed, and then give your liver 1,000 units orally, so the liver gets the benefit as well. In my experience, that is the fastest way to actually both raise the vitamin levels in the blood and also help the liver. But rest assured, if you're taking your vitamin D 2,000-3,000 units daily for a decent amount of time, six months or even more, eventually your blood levels will rise. I have not seen a case so far where this amount of vitamin D does not result in elevated levels of vitamin D in the blood. The only way to not raise your vitamin levels, if you stick with that pathetic RDA that's been defined as only 400 IUs daily. I think that's the dosage that's good enough for children. Coincidentally, that's what they prescribe for children. If you go to the doctor and for whatever reason the doctor thinks that the child has a risk of rickets, they will prescribe for 400 units daily. Well, if that's enough for a child, do you think adults should be taking the same amounts, considering they're usually 4 to 5 times the weight of that child? Probably not.
Well, and your supplement I like because it's 1,000 IUs per drop. And you could, let's say you do have a child that you figure out they're low. Well, it's hard to get children to take anything orally, but you could rub this on them. They're not going to care. You could do it without them even realizing it. Just put it in their little lotion or whatever.
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't irritate the skin. I mean, it does have a little bit of an alcohol smell, but that dissipates almost instantaneously because it's so volatile. So if you apply it on their skin, within 30 seconds, it's all done, and they probably wouldn't even notice it because it really produces no actual sensation in the skin through which they would know that you were medicating them somehow.
Yeah, and it just makes it really easy to know how much you're taking when you've made it 1,000 IUs per drop. So I like that about it. So now they know where they can get a quality vitamin D supplement, in addition to going out in the sun as much as possible and making sure that you're getting in those cholesterol-rich foods. Georgie, can you tell them where to find your product?
Yes, we have a website of our company. The company name is IdeaLabs, like labs for ideas. And then we're based in DC, so the website is IdeaLabsDC. It's all one word, .com. So if they go there, the Calcerol product is on the front page. So all they have to do is, I think they're ordered alphabetically. So it's one of the very first products that we encounter. And it's a bottle that provides 250 servings of 1,000 units. And like I said, if you want to match those 2,000 to 3,000 IU's recommendation, by the Vitamin D Council, that means with our product, you need to apply about twice that amount. So that means 4 to 6 drops. If you use 4 to 6 drops topically with our product daily, the bottle will last you for at least a month and a half. So it is a tiny bottle too, so it makes it very easy and convenient to carry with you if you're flying, with an airplane. Usually a bottle that small that will not cause consternation among TSA agents. So many people like it. So the smaller the better, but it will last you for a while. So don't be fooled by its small size. As they say, big things come in small packages, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's super convenient. I love that aspect. You can even slip it in your purse and take it with you on the go as well. So that's great. And so I will put all the recommendations and everything you've talked about in the show notes below, and including your website. And I just really appreciate your time. I always love learning from you. It's such a pleasure. So any parting words before I let you go?
I think you really are steering your clients and listeners in the right direction, that we need to spend more time outdoors. The way our life has been engineered right now, it's not just a lack of movement, because just like I said, the gorillas don't move much either, but they're out in nature. I mean, I think by some estimate, gorillas move less than 300 feet daily total. I mean, even the most sedentary person in the United States will probably move more than that, right? Yet they're still their health is in much poorer shape than a gorilla's. But what gorillas have is they have a sense of community. They're almost always outside, not almost always. They are not afraid of the sun, and they eat the right foods. and they try to have fun as much as they can without forcing. Right? If you're unhappy, you shouldn't try to be happy. But just keep in mind that everything passes. Everything is temporary. So even if there's something bothering you right now, that will pass too. And making sure that you enjoy the good things in life and share them with people you care about, I think that's one of the most important aspects of health.
Beautiful. Those were perfect parting words. I love it. Well, thank
you.
you once again. We will be back again to have some more discussions about the importance of health. So I appreciate your time, and this has been awesome. So bye for now.
As they say, happiness is only real if it's shared. That was from that movie, Out in the Wild.
And I always love sharing with you too. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
What's up, YouTube followers? Just a quick promo code for you of my show sponsor, dropandfbomb.com. You can get healthy oil packets like coconut oil, MCT oil, and their little pork sticks, salt and pepper pork sticks, no hormones, no nitrates, no artificial anything. It's just really great ingredients that are quick and easy and on the go. Use my code GETFIT, GETFIT, to save 10%. And go to dropandfbomb.com today to get your packets of on-the-go convenient foods, healthy convenient foods. And it's a healthy way to drop an F-bomb today.